You're listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here on another edition of LSU Daily. Welcome in and glad to have you with me. LSU embarrasses themselves on their own home field, embarrasses the alumni, embarrasses just about anybody with a connection to the university, getting completely humbled, humiliated, name your adjective, by the Alabama Crimson Tide in the biggest game of the year with everything on the line, 42-13. We'll recap it all today. Don't want to, but we will, and there won't be much positive, as you can imagine. I'm sure you're all still stewing in it, and you should be. And we'll get into all of it. And I'm glad you're here actually to talk about it with me. Misery does love company, as they say. So let's go through it all together. Invite you to share, subscribe, like, all of those things to help out the podcast. Greatly appreciated. Follow me on social media, Musso Matthew on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram as well. There's been a question really since, I don't know, probably midway through the second quarter Saturday night that many have asked. You've probably asked it yourself. You've heard it. Let me be the latest to ask it. What'd you do for 2 weeks, LSU? What'd you do? Because quite honestly, looks like you sat down, did nothing. Looks like you just sat there and did nothing. I never, ever, even in my wildest thoughts, scenarios, would have predicted that outcome. Could have even foreseen that outcome. After 2 weeks to prepare, after having to face the same exact scenario in a running quarterback that gave you so much trouble 2 weeks ago in the second half, could I have ever seen LSU come out and look that unprepared, that confused, that just clueless on how to stop Jalen Milroe? Never would I have ever imagined or foreseen, when all the trouble you had on offense, really after your first, call it, 4 drives at A&M, for 3/4 of that game, all the trouble you had on offense, getting it going, finding your rhythm, you had the turnovers from Nussmeier, with 2 weeks to prepare, never could I have come up with LSU would be sitting on 6 points, turn the ball over 3 times, and keep their starters in against the Alabama backups to go score a touchdown with 17 seconds left to preserve some stupid 6-year run you're on of scoring a touchdown in a football game. To hell with that 6-year run. Who cares? You got your ass whipped. I don't give a damn that you went and scored a touchdown with 17 seconds. I'm actually mad at you for doing that. That's embarrassing. Take your ass whipping like a man and go home. Sit there and try to score some garbage time touchdown to keep some dumb record. Who gives a damn? Think anybody wanted to see that at the end? Think that built any kind of confidence for this team at the end? Hell no. That was just the cherry on top of a Sunday of embarrassment Saturday night. What'd you do? What did you do for 2 weeks? No one seems to be able to figure it out, including the guys out there on the field. I could go through so many scenarios from this game. I don't really want to. It doesn't matter. You got hammered all night long. I mean, and with the way it started, there's so much energy in that building. There's so much atmosphere. It's everything that you imagined it to be. Is the weather perfect? No, it honestly felt like crap outside. It was really humid and muggy, and you knew there was going to be rain in the area and rain during the game. But it didn't matter. It didn't hamper anyone's excitement, anybody's vibe for that ball game. And Alabama comes out on the first friggin' play, before they even snapped the ball the first time, false start and backed themselves up 5 yards. And that's something that we had talked about. That, man, you hope that the atmosphere can be too much for them. They've been very undisciplined all season long. And right there, the first moment of the game, they do that and back themselves up. You stuff them on 1st and 15, get pressure on Milroe, but he escapes, and you blow a coverage and find a wide-open Ryan Williams for the first down on 2nd and 14, and they were off and running for the rest of the night, literally and figuratively. Jalen Milroe ran for 185 yards and 4 touchdowns on 12 freaking carries. Jalen Milroe, after he killed you last year, ran for 30 more yards on 8 less carries and equaled his career high in rushing touchdowns, which, oh, by the way, he also set against you last year. So disappointing, because LSU's defense had shown great signs of improvement under Blake Baker. They have shown great signs of improvement under Blake Baker since last season. That's not debatable. But what also isn't debatable is the last 6 quarters that this team, not just the defense, they're part of it, but this team has played is so far and away the worst football of Brian Kelly's tenure at LSU. And if your confidence is shaken in Brian Kelly a little bit right now after the game, I don't blame you. That's totally fair. Understand, though, he's not going anywhere for a good bit. They owe him a lot of money, and they have great recruiting classes coming in. There is stuff to build on still with this program. I know it's year 3, and I know everybody wants it, and you know what? They should have taken a step. I'm not absolving them of anything. They should have taken a step. Hell, y'all, we had that conversation after the first game of the season, and we're going to have it again after we finish tearing this game down. So do not think I'm absolving him or his program or the coach of anything. That was a complete failure on Saturday night in the biggest moment of your season, in the biggest moment of the program up until this point, and you fell flat on your face. And we can talk all we want about turnovers, and sure, we'll go through that. We could talk about the penalties. We can absolutely talk about Milroe. We kind of already just did. Anything you want to talk about. Receivers not getting separation, all of it. Play calling, sure. But LSU flat out got whipped up front on both sides of the ball for 60 minutes, and that's it. That's what it comes down to. Period. End of paragraph, end of sentence, full stop, that's it. You got humiliated in the trenches by Alabama's offensive line and by their defensive line. That is where this game was lost. It led to all the other issues that you had. Then you add in the fact that you were incredibly unprepared for the football game, and that's the result that you get. Alabama's not 29 points better than LSU this year. They aren't. Alabama's a good football team. They'll probably make the playoff if they don't go to the SEC championship and lose, and then they'll get eliminated. Alabama's not competing for a national championship this season. They're not that level of team. They're good, but they're closer to LSU this season than not. But what you saw was one team in Alabama who showed up ready to take what they felt was theirs, knowing what was on the line in the football game, and they played like it. And you had a team like LSU who looked like they sat around for 2 weeks, were like, oh yeah, it could be an elimination game and all that stuff, and then they showed up and were like, hey, let's put the pads on and go out there and try to play a football game. That's what it looked like Saturday. I'm not telling you anything you didn't know. You watched the game. Let's talk a little bit more about Milroe. And there's a lot of reasons what he did to LSU was disappointing on Saturday night. And, the one that's chief among them is what we kind of already touched on, where, man, you had 2 weeks to prepare for a running quarterback after Marcel Reed just ripped you to shreds for a quarter and a half in the second half against A&M. And, yeah, and especially after what he did to you last season and all that. And that's very disappointing. But I'll tell you why I'm really disappointed in it. Do you remember the conversation we were having leading up to the game against A&M about Connor Wegman? where he's not going to beat you throwing the football. Stop their run, you'll make them one-dimensional, and go after it. And LSU was so prepared to do that. And they dominated it to the fact that they knocked that kid out of the game. Again, not the flex that you think it is, because Marcel Reed came in and you weren't ready and he torched you. But you were so prepared in that facet and you dominated the game. You forced them to make a change. Jalen Milroe's best asset is his legs. You take them away from him, and he has not nearly been the passer capable of beating you on his own with his arm. And we talked about that. I'm not saying you totally sell out to just stop the run, but my goodness, to allow 15 yards per carry, knowing that this is a kid who his surefire way to beat you is by letting him get loose, taking bad angles, getting out of your lanes, missing tackles, not knowing where to be entirely is how he gets you, and it happens anyway. The fact that he only threw for 109 yards, only needed to throw for 109 yards because you gave up 311 on the ground and 6 touchdowns. That's maddening, especially after having 2 weeks to prepare. You would have stopped him and he beat you from the pocket, tip your hat. But you never even had a chance to do that. The same issues that hurt you against Marcel Reed killed you against Alabama and Milroe. You were constantly out of position. You had nowhere to be. You took bad angles. You didn't stay in your rush lanes. You didn't do any of that. Everything that we talked about, everything that Brian Kelly talked about. You didn't sack him. None of it. Even when you were in position to make tackles, you missed them. All around, bad. Offensively. You want to talk offensively? There's plenty to go through here. Let's start with Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier looks like a completely different player the last 6 quarters. His confidence looks completely shaken by what happened starting in that second half against Texas A&M with the 3 interceptions, and it carried over immediately. That's the most disappointing part of this. The second half against A&M looked like a continuation of that on Saturday night. And yes, you have to help Garrett Nussmeier out. Yes, it's hard to play quarterback when you're such a one-dimensional team on offense like LSU is. It's hard to play quarterback when your receivers are not getting the separation that you need them to, and LSU's aren't, and they haven't been all year. That's been a problem. So you need to be able to find something, scheme, and get around that. But the other part of that is Garrett Nussmeier has to stay on his reads and has to go to the right place with the football, and he's not doing that enough. He is forcing things. He is trying to make the big play every single time. He's trying to stretch the field when he doesn't need to. And it's costing his team. The 3rd down and 4 early in the game. Mason Taylor is open for the first down, wide open. It's an easy dump off to him, and he's got the first down and maybe even picks up a little bit more. Nuss throws deep to Kyron Lacey, who's covered, and it's incomplete. There's plenty of examples. I'll give you one more. On LSU's first drive of the second half, you're moving it. You've converted 1 4th down already. You're faced with another one, 4th and 4 at the Alabama 38. And this was a complete pass to Mason Taylor for 12 yards on 4th and 4. And you got the first, and that's great. But Josh Williams was alone in the flat, needing to pick up 4 yards. Just dump it off to him. He gets it. No, instead, you have to try to force the ball down the field. And Mason Taylor has to go up and make a leaping catch because the throw is off target. He makes it, and you get the first, but you had an easy dump off to your running back who could have walked and picked up the first down. It's situations like that that he's forcing the football into now because he feels like he has to go out there and make a play each time. And now that he's started to really turn the football over, his confidence is shaken in that. He's no longer getting, I don't want to say bailed out, but he's no longer kind of getting the benefit of the doubt when he's taking those chances. Garrett Nussmeier has played really well so far this season up until this point. He has to figure out a way to settle back down and get this thing back on track for LSU because the only thing that they have is the passing game. And it can still be successful when he's going through his reads properly, when he's taking the check down, when he's doing everything else. And the other thing is there was a lot of check downs in the game. The problem is they weren't at the right time. I think you see him very uncomfortable back there as well now that more pressure is getting to him. It's disappointing because the thing that LSU's offensive line has done best was pass block, and they really didn't do that well late in the game against A&M or against Alabama on Saturday night, and Nuss was under more pressure. But first and foremost, he has to make better decisions. He has to go through his reads. And that's why it's easy to look at Nussmeier right now and feel down on him, because everything that we've heard is happening. Turnover machine, bad decision making, gunslinger. All the things that you've heard, you're seeing. So it's real easy to get down on him. And if you go back and look at games earlier this year, yeah, there's times he made mistakes that he was let off the hook. South Carolina, the 2 interceptions he had against South Alabama, we hand-waved it away. There were signs, but you were winning, and he was throwing for a bunch of yards and making huge plays when you needed it most. That's not happening right now. They need to figure out a way to have him bounce back. I really thought he would have bounced back and had a great go of it against an Alabama secondary that had struggled. But you credit them too. They locked down LSU's receivers. You don't have a true number one. You don't have anyone who can get separation. So we'll see going forward from Nuss. But right now, he as well is playing his worst football so far of the season. Hopefully he can settle down, refocus. LSU can have a little bit more success down the stretch. The running game. Oh, the running game. I'm going to start this conversation like this. Caden Durham is your best running back. That is not debatable. He is your most dynamic. He is your best running back, and he needs to play. He needs to touch the ball a lot. 20, 25 times a game, Caden Durham needs to touch the football. I understand he's a freshman. I understand this is a huge game. I don't care. He is your best running back. If he goes out there and makes a mistake and fumbles in a key situation, oh well. You're trying to win the biggest game of the year, and he's your best chance at running back to do that, and he needs to play. Caden Durham had 4 carries for 56 yards in the first quarter. You were having success. He had the long one on the first drive, and then on the very next drive, you handed it to him 3 straight times, and it resulted in a first down. You were having success. 4 carries, 56 yards. Caden Durham carried the ball 4 more times the entire game. That is inexcusable. To the point where I thought he might have been hurt. That is inexcusable. No, LSU hasn't been good at running the football this year. Yes, they struggle at blocking. Yes, the scheme needs to be diversified. All of that. You know what the other thing is? Your best freaking running back needs to play and try to help make up for some of that. That's what happened against South Carolina. You saw it, you've seen it over and over and over again. And for him to have 4 carries for 56 yards in the first quarter and then carry the ball 4 more times the rest of the game. And you tried to throw it to him. That's fine. You tried to get him touches. I get it. But where you were having the most success with him was on the ground. Keep giving it to him until they prove that they can stop him in that facet, and they didn't do it, and that is inexcusable. Your play calling in the red zone continues to stink. On that first drive, you get down there to the 5-yard line on that Caden Durham run. He doesn't touch the ball again on the drive. You have to kick a field goal. You need him in there in the red zone. No excuse. You get down to the 4 to the 5-yard line again. Nuss gets tricked by a coverage, throws an interception at the goal line, and at that point, it was time to turn out the lights. That's been a problem for LSU all season. Red zone. It's been terrible. We've talked about that since game number 1, and it hasn't gotten any better. And a big part of it is because you don't have a running game. You need a running game in the red zone. You constantly shot yourself in the foot all night long, on offense and on defense. The sequence at the end of the first half drove me absolutely mad. For LSU to not come away with any points right there. It was still set up for you, y'all. The first half had been a disaster. You got the turnover on downs. The very next play, you fumble. Sack fumble, and they get the ball right back. Horrible. Felt just like the Ole Miss game where you get the big turnover and then you throw an interception on the very first play of your drive. It was the same situation. Alabama goes down and makes it 21-6. And even at that point, you're still down 2 scores. You get the ball at half and you have it right here to go on a 2-minute drive and try and score. And you're moving the ball down the field. And ultimately, you get nothing. And the end of the half call, where it was just a little swing pass to Durham, where he loses 6 yards, when all you need to do, you're on the Alabama 43, is run a play to get upfield and get a few yards and kick the field goal, 21-9. Then you have a chance to score a touchdown, and you're right back in it to start the second half. And you didn't. It was awful, inexcusable there, shooting yourself in the foot. Even with the interception on your first drive of the second half, LSU has a chance there. They have Alabama off the field. You get the big sack on third down, but you grab the face mask. And at that point, Alabama was going to score on that drive. You let them off the hook. You had them off the field. You finally got to Milroe, and you grabbed the face mask. And it was a face mask. It was absolutely a face mask. No one argued with me. It was. He came across his face mask and turned his head. It's a face mask. Also, don't throw crap on the field. Stupid. So you were unprepared. You lost. You got humiliated in the biggest game of the season. What does that mean going forward? Well, your season's over. And this is going to be really similar to the conversation that we had after LSU lost to USC in the opener. When LSU lost to USC in the opener, we kind of recalibrated expectation immediately there, as we've done the last 3 years when LSU has lost in the opener. And told you with that loss, looking at the schedule that they had ahead of them, they brought 8-4 into play. Then, of course, we know what happened. They rattled off the wins and whatnot. Now you sit at 6-3. You've lost 2 in a row, and you're playing your worst football of the season. You have 3 very winnable games left. You will be favored in all of them, and you need to win out. The other thing we talked about after that opening season loss to USC was year 3, you're looking for that jump. Brian Kelly's teams have always had a jump in year 3. And it was going to be really hard to climb out of that hole. And with a 12-team playoff, there was expectation to be in the top 12. Does LSU still have deficiencies? Sure, but you saw for a good majority of this season that in spite of those deficiencies, they were able to keep themselves into the conversation into November, and that's why it stinks so bad that you lost that game Saturday night, because it was there for the taking. Atlanta was still there. Everything was still there. But one thing we talked about after the opening loss to SC was, okay, recalibrate expectations, fine. It's going to be hard. It's going to be an uphill battle now to get where you want to go. But the one thing that you can't do is have a regression in your record. The first 2 years, you finished 9-3 in the regular season, won your 10th game in the bowl game, and you moved on. And each of those years felt different, and this one would feel even more different at 9-3. This would be the first time that 9-3 for most people would feel like a regression. But I said you better finish 9-3. What you can't do is finish 8-4. And I will tell you that again right now. LSU better finish 9-3 and get that 10th win in the bowl game and match what you've done, because this already feels enough like a regression, especially after the last 6 quarters. You finish 8-4, that's going to follow you forever. Brian Kelly's not going anywhere. Brian Kelly shouldn't go anywhere. Mentioned it earlier. You have a great recruiting class coming in. The majority of those guys are firm in their commitment, at least at the top of that class. And that's ultimately what you want. You have the number 1 player in the country coming in who's a quarterback. You have a great crop in Louisiana to build on again in 26 and have another top 5 class there. The next 2 recruiting cycles are potentially program changing for LSU. Potentially. Not to say it'll happen. Not to saying that's why you should put all your eggs in the Brian Kelly regime and that basket. Not telling you that. What I'm telling you is the future does appear to be bright. The other half of that is, while everybody is so angry right now, and again, if your confidence is shaken, I don't blame you. My confidence is a little bit shaken as well. But going forward with what they had to build, where you can finally really solve the talent issue that LSU has, and they are talent deficient in spots, especially on defense, it's going to make it even harder to defend what has been happening with this team. Does that make sense? That's the last step. You've really fixed your coaching staff on the defense. Could you make a tweak on offense? Maybe. But the last step is to get the talent in here. And they're on their way to doing that. And if it doesn't improve then, that's when those conversations about moving in a different direction ramp up. And by that point, the buyout would be manageable. But right now, this is the direction you're going, and there's still a light at the end of the tunnel right now, given what you're building in recruiting. The other thing, and we touched on it briefly earlier about LSU just shooting themselves in the foot and shooting themselves in the foot. A problem for Brian Kelly's team so far at LSU have been consistently being able to take control of a football game when the opportunity presents itself. You've seen it in the opener this year. You saw it against Texas A&M. You saw it again on Saturday night. LSU in the first half had opportunities to take control of that football game and could not do it. You had Bama punt and then go turnover on downs in back-to-back possessions. You got nothing out of both of them. That was an opportunity with the game still there at one possession to take control of the game, get the crowd back into it, and go forward. And you got nothing. And Bama kept going. They neutered that atmosphere in Tiger Stadium to where it was a complete non-factor. And that has been a theme so far through the first 2 years and some change. You can go back to the opener last season against Florida State. You stopped them, 3 or 4 straight times. Had a chance to be up big. They're leaving points out there. You hear the phrase in baseball all the time, you left a small village on base. LSU left a small village on base again on Saturday night by leaving points out there constantly. You did it against A&M. That has to stop. When you have the opportunity to take control, you have to take control of the game. And they just have not been good enough at that the first 2 years and some change under Brian Kelly. That really needs to improve. Last thing. Thank you all for listening today. That is Brian Kelly's follow you forever game while he's at LSU. Every coach has them. No matter what they accomplish, you'll never be able to escape what happened in this one game. Ed Orgeron. Troy. Ed Orgeron helped bring forth the greatest college football team any of us have ever seen. And he never escaped the loss to Troy in 2017. Nor the 30-point loss on the road at Mississippi State in 2017. Those followed him forever. People still brought up Troy regardless. Les Miles has too many of them to count. Even though Les won a title, won 3 SEC titles, played for another national title. The Monday night game against Tennessee. Never escaped that. The T-Bob game against Tennessee. Ole Miss 2009. We could go on and on and on. They followed him forever. Even Nick Saban. His was a little bit different. Losing to UAB in his first year. It was his first year, and he'd inherited, DiNardo's program. And he's building forward. And it followed him forever, but in a different way. It was more brought up as a sense like, man, even Nick Saban lost to UAB. But that game followed him forever. This one will follow Brian Kelly forever. As long as he is at LSU, people will bring up the Alabama game with a playoff spot on the line after 2 weeks to prepare in your home stadium at night, the environment that you want, a huge visitor list on the sideline to see that environment, and you lost 42-13 and were never competitive in the football game. It will follow him for as long as he is at LSU. And it should. Because that was just wholly unacceptable, what happened Saturday night. So you go forward. You have 3 more games left. You'll face the Florida Gators on Saturday in Gainesville, your final road test of the season. We'll see what happens with the quarterback position at Florida. One thing's for certain, though. If I'm LSU, you have to do all you can to keep pace with the previous 2 years. Finish 9-3. These guys will put out some good tape, hopefully for the NFL. You'll go play in the ReliaQuest Bowl or something like that. No one will care. It won't be interesting. But, man, you have to avoid this year feeling more like a regression than it already does. That's going to wrap it up. Y'all, share, subscribe, please like, follow me on social media. All that greatly appreciated. Be here next time for more on LSU Daily. We'll start mixing in some more LSU basketball now as well. Matt McMahon's Tigers 2-0 on the season, and hopefully get you a few updates from fall practice. Been following it. I've only been out there once. Baseball, that is. But been following it. Been talking to a few people who have made it out there a little bit more. Just to get a read. There's some guys really standing out. So with the football season really, for all intents and purposes, over for playing for big things, we'll start to mix in a little bit else as well here. So get subscribed, share, like, follow me on social media. Greatly appreciated, and be here next time for more. This is LSU Daily.